Today we're talking Ys 1 and 2, developed by Nihon Falcom in the late 1980s. Now there are so many versions of these games, but for the sake of time I'm just going to touch on the history of these games briefly and then focus on the gameplay of the version that you can all play right now and should play on your PC. And hopefully soon on Switch and PlayStation. I don't know, it was rumored. Ys, Ancient Ys Vanished, which we'll just call Ys 1 from now on, released in 1987 for the NEC PC 8801. What a name, let's just cram all the numbers we can. So, Ys was made to be a kind of an anti-RPG. In an interview, the main designer of Ys, Hashimoto Masaya, said that RPGs at that time were becoming too difficult. Developers kept gearing their games towards the hardcore RPG fanatics. But Hashimoto took a step back and asked, "Is this really fun? Are we just creating a medium that isolates new players?" So with Ys, he put himself in the player's perspective. He wanted to make a game that's more accessible, simplified but not dumbed down. Ys is Babby's first RPG, but they achieved it in a way that doesn't make the game feel like a Fisher-Price toy to the hardcore RPG audience, and that was by focusing on action. They also use the word kindness a lot in the promotional material for the game. Kindness towards the player. In Ys, you can save your game anywhere.
This game actually lets you save whenever you want to. I can save the game right now if I want to. Not during the boss.
Outside of the boss fights. Leveling up is a very fast process. In contrast to a lot of the turn-based RPGs where you're running back and forth to trigger random battles, watching the battle transition, hearing the same 5 seconds of battle music as you're mashing that A button over and over to select fight, only to realize that this isn't leveling up your magic, and that you have to level up each magic skill individually by using it repeatedly. This is Ys. You just bump, 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 and you're done. I think it's this kindness that has made it almost timeless. Look at all the re-releases of Final Fantasy in recent years. New turbo mode, now with auto battle, gold multipliers, turn off battle encounters altogether. They know that the games are inflated with crap. Ys said to hell with that from the start. Re-releases of Ys don't have turbo mode and all those features because it never needed them. That to me, that's the kindness that they were talking about. Value for money can go in the trash can. Ys values your time. Ys was made within just 5 months. And then less than a year later, Falcom released Ys, Ancient Ys Vanished, the final chapter, which we'll call Ys 2. Ys 2 was a brand new scenario that took place immediately after the events of Ys 1. It expanded the world and added a magic system. Since the PC 88 releases, these games have been ported to so many systems. I won't bore you with all their names because there's so many, but here's most of them on screen right now. And because of the technical limitations of the systems they were being ported to, port might not even be the right word. Maybe built would be better. But anyway, maybe I'll focus on version differences later on down the line. Let's fast forward to today. If you, yes, you, want to play Ys today, where can you play it? What version should you play? Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles Plus, available on the PC. An amalgamation of all the things that have been added and tweaked in Ys over the years, while keeping intact the identity of what made Ys so great back in the day. Ys 1 starts with adult Christian sailing toward a giant storm wall. Who would willingly sail into that? Our boy Adol, that's who. His boat crashes and we wash up on the shore. People from Barbados, a nearby fishing village, carry Adol off, and we take control of Adol after waking up in the village's clinic. And from this point, most of the world is actually opened up to you. A lot of doors will be locked, but theoretically, while completely unarmed, you could stumble up to the door of a boss that the game expects you to be max level before you fight. There's your open world game. We know as much as Adol does at this point. Nothing, making it necessary to talk to the villagers. The doctor points you towards his son, the head of the militia. His son points you toward the next town. Most players will leave Barbados without a weapon, and this is where you first encounter the iconic bump combat. A one-page image tutorial pops up and explains to you how to properly bump. It's very simple. Bump into an enemy to damage them. If you bump directly, you'll also take damage. So the goal is to bump into them off-center, from the side, or from behind, effectively dodging their attack. And that's it. That is the entirety of the combat for the whole game. While you're reading the pop-up combat tutorial, you may have started tapping your leg or bopping your head without even realizing. While the town you were just in was playing a nice song, as soon as you set foot outside, the game smacks you in the face with the soundtrack. Strap in, bucko. You're Eason now. I think if you were to ask anyone who's played any Ys game what stood out the most, it'd be the music. Most of Ys 1's music was composed by Ishikawa Miyako, and the music she composed for the PC-88 has seen so many iterations. I'm not well versed enough to talk about the technological amazements that some versions have accomplished, but I Chronicles wasn't subject to the hardware limitations of any of the systems that came before, so Falcon's sound team went all out and re-recorded all the music in the game. Chronicles lets you swap between 3 soundtracks at any time you're playing too. The original PC-88 soundtrack, 1997's Ys Complete, or 2009's Ys Chronicles version. Alongside changing the music, the game also lets you swap freely between the 1997 and 2009 character art. On my first playthrough, I loved interacting with each character twice to see both art styles, though most of the time I think I preferred the 1997 character art, combined with the 2009 re-recordings of the soundtrack. The original is fantastic too, the complete version is just, who cares? So, within your first few minutes of Ys Chronicles, your interest has been piqued by an opening movie which was directed by Shinkai Makoto. Yes, that's right, you weebs, the Your Name guy. You've been charmed by the town theme and its residents, confused by a pop-up that tells you to bump. Hey wait, where's the action button? And then sent out into the field to bump with some kick-ass music blasting in your face. Now it's time to really get Eason. This is where most people have their lesson learned moment. You can die really quickly in Ys. There are no iframes, no grace period when you take damage like a lot of games have. If you get hit, your character doesn't flash and give you time out to get out of danger. You just get hit again. Game over. Back to the menu you go. Oh, you didn't save your game? You can save anywhere you want to. We gave you the tools to do so. Why didn't you use it? Well, Doofus, back to the opening credits with you. Try to understand the kindness of this game a bit more, okay? Back in the field again, you get your first successful bump. The sensation overwhelms you. It takes over your body. You feel the bump in your fingertips. The bump travels up your arms and to your heart. Your heart isn't auto-rhythmic anymore. Your heart beats in time with the bump now. You remember the lesson you just learned and save your game. You bump again. Oh, what a sick bump that was. This is a bump or be bumped world. Have you been bumped? Don't worry too much. You remember that kindness? Regenerating health is a staple of the series, which started back with the original Ys 1, and is often pointed to as one of the first regenerating health games and what kind of popularized the mechanic. If you're outside, stand still for a second and your HP goes back up. Bump. Get bumped back. Stand still. Heal up. Save your game. Repeat. That's Ys, and it remains fun for the entire game. Even though every enemy in the game basically attacks you in the same way. Trust me, it remains fun. In Chronicles, enemies have a power attack too. They'll occasionally swing at you, which extends the range at which you can be damaged. Wait, why do they get an attack button and I don't? On the easiest difficulty, it's only this swing that can damage you. The game world is quite small in scale. In the overworld, you'll find 3 towns, including the one you started in. All NPCs in towns have something to say, and if you pay attention, there are some hidden side quests for you to do too. Outside of the towns, you'll battle your way through 3 dungeons, with the final dungeon being longer than the first 2 combined. The dungeons are pretty fun. They combine standard mazes, combat challenges, and some puzzle solving to get through. The abandoned mines have a low light gimmick, and it's this inability to see that makes it possibly the most difficult part of the game. This difficulty is balanced by having parts of the cave lead out to a bridge. Remember that word, kindness? These bridges are outside, so you can just stand still and heal up mid-dungeon. The third and final dungeon is a 24-floor tower, and has one backtracking segment that I think is the only real aspect of the game that feels like a relic of the 80s. A confusing reason as to why you can't advance, forcing you to climb back down several floors and then all the way back up. Actually, you can go there straight after rescuing... Yeah, I know. But no first-time player is going to do that. Actually, I get... shut up. Within those dungeons, you'll fight 7 bosses, with 5 of them being after your max level, so you can't just over-level your way to a free win. which is something I kind of miss in future East games. This is the only East game that has a level cap like that. I don't know, I'm torn. I like that future games give players a way to make the game easier if they need it, but I miss being able to talk about a boss from the same perspective as everyone else that played it, you know? So many of the most popular, dude, that boss, bro, games have so many variables that it's hard to relate to other people's experience. Whereas the final boss in East, everyone got crushed in the same way. You're the same level, you have the same equipment. Anyway, the bosses in East 1 are a bit hit and miss. The first boss you encounter is maybe one of my least favorites in the entire East series. It's crap. It has you standing still and waiting for RNG to put the boss in a position that lines up with an opening. But it's also the second biggest lesson learned moment in the game. This bozo has a very high defense and he hits hard, but you run into him very early in the game. Did you leave the dungeon, go back to the second town and upgrade your gear before fighting him? No? Lesson learned. Stats are really important in East, and that remains true throughout the entire series. But on the other hand, East 1 has some of my favorite bosses in the series. I won't spoil too much, I guess, but the final boss, the heads. But I especially love the third boss you encounter. A big winged monster who explodes into a frenzy of bats that you chase around the room. It's considered by many as the hardest boss in the game, but once you get the rhythm, it feels so nice to take him down. I love bosses that require you to manipulate their movement to beat them. This is also where you really come to notice the lack of iframes in the East series. If you make one mistake, best bet you're taking multiple instances of damage and just game over screening instantly. Anyway, in case you haven't played the game, I'll let you discover the other bosses for yourself. The story in East 1 is quite light, but given that the game can be completed in one sitting, they do a good job at building a fantasy world that revolves around a 700-year-old legend. The game itself tells us very little about who we're playing as, the classic thing where the player is meant to project themselves onto the protagonist. But if you look outside the game, we actually get to know quite a bit about adult Kristen. 1987 was a time when many games used media outside of the game itself to set up or expand the story. Should I really have used the past tense was there? The original PC 88 version comes with a 27-page backstory about Adol and describes him as a famous adventurer who lived 1,000 years ago. Adol left behind 100 journals of his adventures, and East 1 is the first of those journals that were translated and rewritten for us, the player, to enjoy the stories of Adol's adventures. And yeah, over 100 journals. Falcom really future-proofed this series before they even released their very first game. East 2 is then the second journal of Adol that we get to play, and the story continues directly from where East 1 left off, the only game in the series to really have this direct link. It's East 2. We start our journey atop the floating island of East. The tower that we battled through in East 1 was built so the demons could reach the island, and now we're here. East 2 has 4 villages, 4 dungeons, and 7 bosses, with the final dungeon being longer than the first 3 combined. The combat in East 2 actually plays quite differently to East 1. The bump is much more lenient now, with the addition of the diagonal bump. Once again, as soon as you walk out into the field, you're greeted with a single image pop-up tutorial that explains how to perform the diagonal bump. It's again pretty simple. If you're running diagonal, you're pretty much safe, minus when the enemies do their power attack. During the first dungeon, you acquire the ability to use magic. Here you are, bump haters. You now have a button to push. No more flailing your right hand around wondering what to do while it's playing. Fireballs give you a way to safely attack enemies from afar, and you'll get 2 upgrades for it, turning it into a crazy powerful homing explosion come late game. The mana system is also very lenient. As you use fireballs, it depletes quickly, but wait a couple seconds and it refills automatically. But with each magic use, your maximum mana slowly reduces. So the more you spam fireballs, the less fireballs you can spam in a row. When you get low on mana, just rest in a town and you're good to go again. Fireballs are fun, until they're not. To me, it feels like they were too excited about the fireballs that they over-relied on them. Almost all the bosses in the game are invulnerable to your bump. The only way to damage them is by fireballs. It kind of strips away what made East 1 boss fights so much fun to me, bumping headfirst into an enormous monster like the reckless buffoon Adol is. There are still some good fights in this game, but they don't really feel better than the first game, despite us having new combat maneuvers. Dungeons in 2 are a bit more mazy and puzzly than the first game too, with the final dungeon being one of those East 2 walkthrough. How the hell was I supposed to know that? The game has fast travel, so it was balanced around this loop of explore the area, get confused, teleport out, talk to some random old man, walk back in, get confused, teleport in, out, in. There are enough hints within the game for you to work it out without a guide, but I'd almost recommend glancing at a walkthrough for the final dungeon. In fact, I wrote what I thought was a quick dock point guide for a friend when I got them to play this, and they were audibly stunned by the wall of text I blasted them with in their DMs. I don't see this as a fault of the game. In fact, I kind of love it, but I can see many disliking the final dungeon to the point that it dampens the rest of the game for them. Yet then in the same breath, they gush over Zelda Minish Cap or something. Ding dongs, it's the same thing. If anything, Minish Cap is way more obtuse and worse than Ys 2. So all of these factors makes Ys 2 a longer game than the first, which means you spend more time with the story. And the Chronicles version especially is packed with flavor text that fleshes out characters and adds a lot for players to seek out. And it's these extras that make Ys 2 my favorite in the entire series. Ys 2's magic system also lets you use Transform, which turns yourself into a cute little demon. Now, as a demon, you can understand the enemy's demon language, meaning you can now talk with every enemy in the game. And every enemy in the game has a unique name and dialogue. Now, every enemy really means every. You can talk with the lowest of low fodder enemies deep within the mines before you even had this magic ability. And you can even take the transform magic with you into boss fights and talk with the boss. What if you're a demon and talk to a villager? Well, they all have unique interactions to that too. Obviously, you also have fire magic too, right? Well, what happens if you blast a village kid in the face with a fireball? They react. And again, every NPC in the game has a different reaction to getting slammed by fire. It's incredibly fun running around town and just drilling all these poor people with fireballs to see them scream out overused references and dated jokes. There's also a gifting system in the game. Throughout the world, you can collect fruit and flowers which you can use on yourself as healing items, or you can give it to people and animals as a gift. All villagers and some animals track how kind you are to them, and you can level up your friendship with even more unique dialogue as they come to like you more. Some will even give you something in return, which is one of the hidden side quests in the game, collecting all the unique presents by finding the villagers that are kind enough to gift you back once you earn their trust. You don't need to do any of this gifting. In fact, you could play this entire game without even knowing that a gifting system exists. But that's what makes this remake so great in my opinion. All this flavored dialogue is honestly my favorite thing in the game. Most of it was added in the 1997 complete version, but it wasn't officially available in English until Chronicles. And it all just exists to exist. It's not shoved in your face, and it doesn't leave you with a feeling of missing out if you don't see it. Not to say that remakes and re-releases that add new content and shove it down your throat even though you're already fooled by replaying the same old content just to reach it are bad, but just that you can add content in other ways. And that's it. Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles Plus is one of my favorite video games of all time. You can get it for about $5 on GOG or Steam during any of their sales. Search it up right now, I bet it's on sale somewhere. That's 2 games for $5. 2 games that are under about 10 hours long. What have you got to lose? It's been hinted that it's coming to the Switch this year, but it hasn't been officially announced yet. And Falcom also said that the reception of the Switch version of Oath and Felghana Memoir will determine whether they port that to the PlayStation. And Memoir has only been released in Japanese so far, and it didn't seem to sell too well. So, for the meantime, you've got the digital storefront PC versions, or the very difficult to find and probably expensive used PSP version. Or, you know. If you haven't played these games before, I really think you should give them a try. If you have played these games before and you like them, I think you'd enjoy checking out the other releases of the game. The TurboGrafx version is a lot of fun with its music, cutscenes, and voice acting. The DS version is a bizarre take on the game that adds an attack button and a whole new area. Or even Japanese exclusive versions. The PS2 version has a combo system. The X68K has incredible character art, weird enemy designs, and an altered soundtrack. It's almost never ending. I think the number of remakes Ys 1 and 2 has gotten is a testament to Falcom's passion behind the game. Ys was quite popular at its time of release, but compared to the big video game franchises of today, Ys remains quite niche, and Falcom is still a small-scale developer. They can't just re-release the game every few years as a fail-safe way to print some money. This isn't The Last of Us or Skyrim. And all the modern re-releases try to add something significant to the game. I think Ys 1 and 2 has genuinely become a better game over time. And I think it's a real testament to what you can achieve with remakes of retro games. There's not enough Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap in the world. And I don't think they have to be done either. I think another re-release of Ys 1 and 2 could make the game get even better again. I'm waiting, Falcom. Hit me. Do it. Alright, thanks for watching and listening to me gush over a video game not many people care about. This is extremely self-indulgent, and if you listen to even more than 2 minutes of it, thank you. There you go, Fox. I did it. I made another Ys video. You can find me on Twitch and other shit like that. I don't fucking know. Bye!